Cairo never sleeps, but it twitches. Under neon buzz and satellite towers, the city simmers with secrets. The minarets cast long shadows at midnight, and the Nile reflects more than just starlight. It mirrors the movements of those who should be long dead. Layla walked through the macadam hills with her hood drawn low. Her ribs ached with every breath. The scar where the blade pierced her heart still fresh, a ghost pain she'd carry forever. The wound that caged a god, now she was more than bloodline. She was the prison, and Wepwawet's whispers crawled through. Her skull like spiders spun from silver. Let me finish it. They wear the old skins. They call themselves jackals, but they are only leeches. She quieted him with a thought. There were still pieces of him out there. Cults, splinters, hidden in plain sight. They'd moved fast after the collapse of the temple, fled from Alexandria like rats fleeing fire. But they were gathering again, in Cairo, in secret. And Layla had already found the first of them. He was called Mukhtar the Hollow, a priest in the guise of a historian. He ran a museum in Zamalek, curated relics older than dynasties. People came to learn. But beneath the artifacts and tour groups, he kept a catacomb where jackal skulls were anointed in blood and names were carved into sandstone with teeth. He wasn't just hiding relics, he was building an ark. Layla stood in the museum's lower corridor where the tourists couldn't go. The lights flickered as she entered the archive vault, moonlight slanting through the slits in the high windows. She could feel it, a presence. Then he spoke. I wondered when you'd come. Mukhtar stepped from behind a stone sarcophagus, dressed, not in robes but a business suit. His eyes were entirely black. Your blood burns like a torch, girl. You are not the jackal anymore. You are the chain. I'm the end, she replied coldly. He raised his hands, not in surrender but reverence. We don't want war with you. She narrowed her eyes. You raised a god from corpses. You slaughtered my kin. You hollowed out the city's bones and filled it with howls. And now you say peace? Mukhtar smiled. Because war has already begun. You're not the only one with a key, and not all cages stay shut. Behind him, a rune flared, one carved in obsidian, humming with ancient energy. Layla stepped back, too late. The floor cracked open and something came through. Not a werewolf, something worse. It crawled out with limbs too long and jaws that split vertically. A jackal's mask fused to its head. Its chest was hollowed, but inside beat a second face, a snoutless, weeping maw of silver fangs and human sorrow. Mukhtar whispered, Meet the choir of Wepwawet. Layla didn't hesitate. She shifted. The bones screamed, her muscles tore, her breath caught in her throat, but she did not resist. The wolf came forward, taller than any jackal, faster than sound. She tore into the beast before it could stand, but the choir didn't die like flesh. It sang, a horrible, gurgling sound that rattled her vision, made her bleed from the ears. Reality bent. She saw herself hundreds of times over, dying in every one. The choir screamed with her voice. Then, you can't kill what you cage. Layla reached inside it and tore the face from its chest. It collapsed. Light leaked from its ribs like sand from an hourglass. Mukhtar fled into the dark, but not before whispering one last curse. You've chosen the red path now. The last gate lies beneath Old Memphis, and the godchild waits. Old Memphis was not a city for the faint of heart. Beneath the dust of centuries, it was a place where time had forgotten itself, where secrets buried deeper than the tombs had festered in silence, waiting for someone reckless enough to unearth on them. Layla's feet scraped across the cracked stones as she entered the ruins, her breath steady despite the thrum of power that buzzed beneath her skin. The red path had led her here. She could feel it in the air. The same pull that had brought her to the ruins of Alexandria. The same gnawing hunger that had once twisted the souls of the Moonjackals. But now, it was something different. A promise of something darker. A promise that this was where it would end. In the distance, the silhouette of the Pyramid of Djoser loomed over the remains of the ancient necropolis, its stone blocks scarred by time and weather. But beneath it, beneath everything, Layla knew there was another layer, an abyss. And in that abyss they had hidden the last gate, the last door that would lead her to the godchild. Layla wasn't alone. Idris had followed her in silence, still bearing the scars of the temple's destruction. His eyes were haunted now, darker than they'd ever been, but she couldn't leave him behind. "You're not the only one with blood on their hands," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I didn't ask for help," Layla replied, her teeth gritted. She could feel the beast rising, the weight of its hunger suffocating her, but she kept it in check. She would not let it consume her, not yet. They approached the entrance to the hidden catacombs beneath the pyramid. The ground had crumbled around, the edges revealing an ancient doorway with symbols that no human had spoken in centuries. Layla pushed the door open. It groaned, releasing a thick cloud of dust and centuries of forgotten air. Inside, the walls were adorned with fading frescoes, their colors indistinguishable from the shadows they clung to. The path wound deeper into the earth, its air heavy with the scent of decay and long-forgotten rites. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, and on that altar a figure lay unmoving. A child, not a normal child. It was him, the god-child. The creature was small, no more than 5 years old, but its eyes gleamed with a wisdom that should not exist in a mortal being. Its skin shimmered like marble, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. In the stillness of the room, the child's chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically, as though in perfect tune with something far beyond human understanding. And then it opened its eyes, its gaze fixed directly on Layla, and the world stopped. It spoke without words, but the meaning was clear. "You are my mother." Layla recoiled, instinctively reaching for her blade, but the child's voice held her still. "You are the one who carries my blood." The words were not spoken aloud but pressed into her mind, overwhelming her with their force. "You are the one who chose the red path, and now you will unlock the gates." Layla felt the weight of those words settle into her bones, the weight of the truth. The child was not just the last of the Moonjackals. It was Wepwawet, reborn. It was the god. But it was also something else, something that shouldn't have been. "What the hell is this?" Idris's voice shook with disbelief. "Layla, what are we supposed to do with this thing?" Layla turned to him, her eyes hard. "This is Wepwawet, Idris, and he isn't just a god, he's the future." The child's hand twitched. Layla looked back down at it. "You've come too late," she whispered, her voice thick with the weight of ancient knowledge. "The chains are broken." The altar rumbled. Idris stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. The child rose, levitating off the stone slab, its body folding and shifting, growing before their eyes. Its form twisted in agony, half human, half beast, and then it stopped, frozen. The room fell dead silent, and in that silence, a whisper echoed in Layla's mind. "Your blood will complete me, child of the moon." The child, the god-child, floated before Layla, its body half-formed in a grotesque fusion of human and beast, a vessel both ancient and new. Its eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that shook her to the core. Every fiber of her being screamed. To turn away, to flee, but she was rooted to the spot. Not out of fear, not this time, but because she understood. She understood that this was the end. The child's form contorted again, growing longer, its limbs twisting as though trying to pull itself out of the flesh it was born into. And then, as though it had drawn in the last breath of the earth itself, it spoke again, not through words, but through the very air that surrounded them. "You have awakened me. But the true form requires a vessel, a willing sacrifice." Layla's pulse quickened. She could feel the heavy, malicious presence of Wepwawet's essence pushing against her consciousness, trying to infiltrate her thoughts. It was a whisper at first, soft and coaxing. "Let me in, daughter of the moon. Let me finish what we began and long ago." The weight of the words pressed into her mind, cold and suffocating. The red path, the path she had chosen, had not just been one of vengeance. It had been one of transformation. She had been a key, a binding force, but now she felt the darkness call to her as a lover, as a thing she had known for centuries. The god was not a stranger to her. It was something she had been born to serve, to become. She clenched her fists, trying to hold on to herself. "No," she whispered, but it felt like a lie, because she knew. She knew that the god was already there, in the marrow of her bones, in the whispers of her blood. The child's eyes flickered with recognition. "I do not ask, I demand." Layla stumbled back, her heart hammering in her chest, the beast inside her surging with hunger. The child's form shifted again, its skin splitting, tendrils of smoke and fire pouring out of the cracks like molten lava. And then, a howl. A long, mournful, terrifying howl that reverberated through the catacombs, through the very foundations of the earth itself. Layla's mind fractured, and for a moment, she was no longer Layla. She was the wolf. She was Wepwawet. The transformation was both agonizing and exhilarating. Her skin tore and shifted. Her bones bent, reshaping themselves into something other. It was a pain she had endured before, but never like this. It wasn't just her body changing. It was her soul. The god poured into her, filling her empty spaces with its rage, its power, its insatiable hunger. She opened her eyes, now fully wolf. The child, Wepwawet, now stood before her, no longer small, no longer innocent. It had grown, its form towering over her, a monstrous hybrid of man and beast. It smiled, its maw stretching impossibly wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Now we are whole." Idris could only watch in horror as Layla's transformation reached its peak. Her body was no longer hers, not fully. She was a creature of the god, a being straddling two worlds. The beast within her growled, a primal sound of satisfaction but also of anguish. Idris was frozen, caught between his loyalty to her and the terror of what she had become. "Layla," he whispered, his voice trembling, but she didn't hear him. She only heard the call of the red path, the call of her true purpose. Wepwawet was not finished. He needed to be reborn, and the world would bow before him. Layla turned her gaze to Idris, but there was nothing familiar in the way she looked at him now. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and struggle, were now empty, cold, filled with the infinite hunger of the wolf and the god that controlled it. She took a step forward, and Idris stumbled back, fear surging through him. "Layla," he breathed again, as though repeating her name could bring her back, but she was already gone. With one last glance at the altar, where the god-child had now merged with her, its soul wrapped inside her own, Layla turned toward the exit. Wepwawet's presence was a heavy cloak upon her, guiding her steps. She felt the weight of his desire. The time had come to unleash the true power of the Moonjackals. The time had come for the rebirth of Egypt itself. The air in the catacombs trembled with the scent of death, old and new. Layla stood at the threshold of the pyramid's heart, her senses split between the human and the beast, both clawing for dominance. The god inside her, Wepwawet, now fully awakened, whispered a song of violence, a song that had resonated through the ages, a call to arms that only the most ancient souls could understand. The moon above, unseen but ever present, pulled the beast forward. Behind her, Idris's voice trembled, desperate. "Layla, please!" But she didn't respond. The human in her was silent now, swallowed by the primal hunger. There was no returning from this. Not for her, not for any of them. Outside, Cairo was already shuddering. The streets buzzed with the usual chatter of late-night traffic, but there was an undercurrent of unease, something primal stirring in the air like the prelude to a storm. In the distance, the howls began. At first they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but soon they grew louder, closer. The city's pulse quickened. Layla and Idris emerged from the pyramid, the moonlight bathing the ruins in an eerie glow. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the howls echoed through the streets of Cairo. The sound was unholy, an ancient cry born of the desert, of the blood of kings and beasts. It was a sound that made every soul within hearing distance freeze. Layla's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Her transformation was not complete. It was only beginning. The god inside her was restless, desperate to tear through the skin that still bound him. "Where is it?" Layla's voice was no longer her own. It was laced with a growl, a snarl that cut through the night. Idris stepped back. His hands trembled as he looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. The woman he had known was gone. In her place was a creature born from myth and darkness, a creature whose fangs could rend a city apart. "It's here," he whispered, his voice cracking, and then the storm hit. The first of the Moonjackals descended upon the city like a wave of destruction. A flash of claws and fur, faster than the eye could follow, cut through the streets. They tore through cars, smashed windows, and swept people from their feet. They were wolves in every sense, but with something more, something older. Their eyes glowed the same pale amber as Layla's, their bodies twisted with the strength of 100 wolves and the fury of forgotten gods. They were Wepwawet's army, and they were here to reclaim. Idris scrambled, trying to keep his footing as the night around him erupted into chaos. A scream pierced the air as a man was flung across the street, his body broken and bleeding. The streets turned to mayhem as people fled, but there was no escape. The beasts were everywhere. They tore through the market, shredding stalls and cars, their teeth sinking into flesh with terrifying precision. But Layla didn't move. She stood, her body half beast, half woman, her eyes locked on the full moon above. The howls of the pack called to her. She could feel the pull, the weight of the bloodline coursing through her. She was the alpha now. As the creatures swept through the city, tearing it apart, Layla and Idris made their way toward the heart of Cairo, the palace of the pharaohs. It was here, deep in the bowels of the city, that the last gate to Wepwawet's full resurrection lay. They could not stop now. The godchild had already set its plan in motion. Idris had no choice but to follow. Layla was the key. She was the vessel. But what would happen when she reached the gate? Would the world be consumed in fire? Or would something even worse emerge? Something that could never be controlled? The palace loomed ahead, its once proud walls now crumbled and abandoned. Layla's body was shaking with the ferocity of the transformation. But her eyes, those glowing eyes, burned with purpose. Wepwawet's voice filled her head again. "We are the blood of Egypt, the blood of kings, the blood of wolves." Her breath hitched. Idris stepped closer, but his voice was barely a whisper now. "Layla, what happens when you unlock the gate?" Layla turned toward him. Her eyes gleamed with ancient, unfathomable knowledge. "I don't know." She smiled, revealing sharp, inhuman teeth. "But whatever happens, it won't matter. Not anymore." The gates of the palace were open, the last of the Moonjackals waiting for them inside, and the red path had already been carved in blood. The palace of the pharaohs was a ghost now, its towering columns reduced to skeletal remnants, its grandeur decayed by time and war. But it was also something more, something eternal. As Layla and Idris stood before the gates, the air around them grew thick like the very weight of history pressed down upon them. The once glorious palace was now a tomb, a mausoleum, and inside it was the key to the godchild's final form. The howls of the Moonjackals continued to echo throughout the city, their bloodlust rising with each passing minute. Cairo was in chaos. The streets were filled with the broken and the torn, bodies scattered as the beasts rampaged through the urban sprawl. But Layla felt no fear. She was no longer the woman who had wandered the streets of Cairo just days ago. She was Wepwawet's chosen. She had come here to finish what had been started millennia ago. The door to the inner sanctum of the palace was already open, the heavy stone slabs pushed aside by the relentless force of the Moonjackals. Inside, the darkness was almost absolute, save for the eerie glow of golden runes etched into the walls. Layla's senses sharpened. She could feel the pull of the godchild in every corner of the room. She could taste the power in the air, the power that had been dormant for centuries waiting for this moment. And she knew that this was it, the moment where Egypt's fate would be sealed. Idris was shaking, his eyes darting around the room as he tried to make sense of the madness. "Layla, this isn't right. Layla cut him off, her voice low but filled with an undeniable command. She felt the blood of the Moonjackals surge within her, pushing out all human doubt, all weakness. "We've gone too far for hesitation. Wepwawet's will is clear. The final step is upon us." Her body shuddered as the beast inside her stirred, a primal need rising within her chest. She could feel Wepwawet's power calling her, urging her forward. Idris wanted to protest again, but his words were lost in the depths of the darkness as the altar at the center of the room came into view. The altar was stone, ancient and cracked with symbols carved into it, symbols she had seen before in the tombs of the Moonjackals. There was no turning back now. The child was there, but it was no longer a mere child. The altar hummed with power. As Layla approached, the child, the godchild, lay in the center, its small body twisted and distorted, wrapped in glowing threads of gold. The transformation was nearly complete. Wepwawet had begun his ascent. His eyes, those amber, glowing eyes, were fixed on her. The hunger in those eyes was a living thing, something that could tear the world apart. "You will unlock the gate, daughter of the moon," it whispered, its voice no longer the innocent murmur of a child, but the deep, guttural growl of an ancient, eternal god. Layla stepped closer, her fingers grazing the edge of the altar. It was cold, too cold, like the very bones of the earth itself. The child's form twisted again, its limbs stretching unnaturally, becoming something monstrous, something ancient. And then its form shifted. The altar cracked beneath its weight as the godchild rose, now a full-grown Wepwawet. The form that stood before her was both human and beast, a creature that wore the form of a man but had the essence of a wolf, a god. Its amber eyes locked with Layla's. "You have freed me. Now it is time for blood." Idris stepped forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "Layla, you can't do this." But Layla only turned her gaze toward him, her lips curling into a grin. It was a smile full of fangs, full of hunger. "Idris," she said softly, "it's too late for me. It's too late for everyone." The transformation had reached its final stage. The beast inside her was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. The red path had drawn her to this moment, and now she was no longer just a vessel. She was the Alpha. She could feel the Moonjackal's blood surging through her, urging her to embrace her true form, her true nature. Wepwawet stepped closer, to her, towering over her, his presence so overwhelming that the room seemed to shrink in comparison. He spoke again, this time through both the air and her mind, his words ringing with a power that shook the foundations of the earth. "Now, my daughter, you will lead. The world will fall to its knees before us. Together we will tear the veil of the gods and reshape all that is." The howl that followed was deafening, filling every corner of the room. It was the howl of a god, of a creature that had been born in the darkest parts of the world, a being that was not just an animal, not just a god, but both. Layla felt the weight of the moment. She was no longer the woman she had been. She was something far greater, something far more terrifying. The Moonjackals had lived and died by the will of their god. Now, she would be their queen. But something was stirring inside her. Something different. The beast wanted more, and Wepwawet's power was not just enough for him. It was time for the world to be reborn, to return to its true nature, to return to the wolves. As she raised her arms toward the sky, the city outside began to quake. The howls of the Moonjackals grew in number, deafening now, as the full moon above bathed everything in a blood-red hue. The gates of the ancient world had been unlocked. The world was on the brink. Layla stood before the altar, her arms stretched wide, her body a perfect vessel for the god inside her. The air around her crackled with electricity, the power of Wepwawet coursing through her veins. The full moon above illuminated the room in a blood-red hue, casting long, ominous shadows across the crumbling walls of the palace. Her eyes, glowing like twin suns, reflected the power of the god that had now fully awakened within her. Her transformation was complete. Around her, the Moonjackals howled in a frenzy, the beasts now unleashed upon the streets of Cairo. Their bloodlust would not be sated until the city was consumed by the hunger of the gods. The final reckoning had begun. But even as the beasts surged through the streets, tearing the city apart, Layla could feel something deeper, a stirring in the very heart of her being. It was not the hunger of the beast. It was something darker, something far more ancient. She turned to face the godchild, now Wepwawet, in his full, terrifying form. His presence was overwhelming, a beast god of ancient Egypt, towering over her like a nightmare given flesh. His amber eyes burned with an intensity that threatened to consume everything in sight. "You have freed me, daughter of the moon," Wepwawet's voice rumbled, the words both ancient and powerful. "Now, I shall lead you into the new world, a world of wolves, of power. The gods will bow before us." Layla's lips parted in a smile full of fangs. But even as she embraced the beast within her, she felt the presence of something else, something darker, lurking just beyond the veil. The ground beneath them trembled. The walls of the palace groaned in protest, as if the ancient stones themselves could sense the awakening of powers long thought to be dead. Idris stumbled forward, his eyes wide with panic, his voice hoarse. "Layla, stop this. You don't know what you're unleashing. This isn't the world you—" His words were cut off by a bone-shaking howl. The Moonjackals had reached the heart of the city, their fury palpable as they tore through buildings, clawing their way toward the final piece of the puzzle. Layla didn't answer. She couldn't. The beast was in control now. Its hunger, a tidal wave that swept away everything in its path. She could feel it, the power of the god, the primal fury that would burn the world to ash. Wepwawet took a step toward her, his massive wolf-like paws shaking the earth beneath him. He was the embodiment of an ancient terror, a creature born from the very heart of darkness. "The blood runs deep," he growled. "Now, we take what is ours." He was right. The city was already in chaos. The Moonjackals were a force of nature, unstoppable, tearing through the streets with no mercy. And Layla was at the center of it all, the alpha, the vessel for Wepwawet's power, the one who would reign over the ruins of a broken world. But as the two of them stood together, god and vessel, something began to shift. The power inside Layla, the power she had embraced so fully, began to pulse. It was growing, expanding until it was all she could feel. She heard Wepwawet's voice in her mind again. It was filled with something new, something darker. "It is time, daughter. Time for us to reign." Her body shuddered, her senses overwhelmed by the god's power. She could feel the hunger rising, a primal, insatiable need to devour, to destroy. She had crossed the point of no return. There was no turning back from the path she had chosen. But as the hunger took hold, a voice, small but unmistakable, echoed in the back of her mind. It was the voice of the woman she had been, the woman who had once walked the streets of Cairo, who had loved and laughed, who had dreamed. The voice was faint, weak, but it was still there. No, the beast inside her snarled, drowning out the voice. But it wasn't just the hunger. It was something deeper, something that even Wepwawet couldn't control. The god's presence faltered just for a moment, and in that moment, Layla realized the truth. The bloodline was not hers to command. She had been chosen to unlock the gates of the ancient world, but she had not been chosen to wield the god's power. Wepwawet's eyes narrowed as the moment of hesitation passed. He felt the change in her, felt the resistance. His amber gaze flickered with anger. "You think you can defy me, child?" He hissed, his voice a low growl. "You are nothing without me." But Layla's gaze remained steady, unwavering. Her mind was no longer clouded by the beast's hunger. She saw clearly now. She saw the destruction, the endless bloodshed, the world consumed by wolves. She saw the price of power, and she refused to pay it. In that moment, the air crackled with tension. The Moonjackals outside the palace howled in unison, their bloodlust reaching its peak. But inside the ancient ruins, Layla stood firm, the weight of the godchild's presence pressing down on her. She clenched her fists, her nails cutting into her palms. She could feel the beast inside her, the hunger, the rage. But she could also feel something else, something human. And for the first time since the transformation began, she made a choice. "No," she whispered. "This ends now." She raised her arms to the sky, and the moon above her pulsed, its crimson light reflecting her resolve. She had unlocked the gates, but she would not allow the world to burn. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the god's power surged one last time. But it was no use. Layla's will was stronger. The bloodline had been awakened, yes, but the wolf did not rule her. With a final roar, she pushed the godchild back into the darkness from which it had come. The altar cracked, the runes on the walls crumbled, and the energy in the room dissipated, leaving only the faintest echo of the beast's presence. The Moonjackals, lost without their alpha, howled in confusion, but it was too late. Their reign was over. As the sun began to rise over Cairo, the once bustling streets lay silent. The city, battered and broken, was still alive, but only just. Layla stood in the ruins of the palace, her body still marked by the transformation, but her mind clear. The red path had been walked, but the world would not fall. Not today. She turned toward Idris, her face streaked with blood, her eyes no longer glowing with the hunger of the beast, but with the knowledge of what she had done. The world would survive for now. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling legends and terrifying tales, make sure to like this video. It really helps us out. You can also click on our Ultimate Werewolf playlist to watch more horror and cryptid stories. The link is in the description below. And if you love horror, folklore, and unexplained mysteries, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of fear seekers. But don't stop there. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Because in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.